Come on, guys. Here we go. Let me just say, this is a nature reserve over here. Okay, Pat, because it's raining up in the mountains, so only the first waterfall, the little waterfall, we're going over there. And then we're going to talk also about the biblical connection to Engedi. All right, let's go. So you're going to have more time in the spot today. On the left-hand side, you can see the different animals that we have over here from foxes, desert foxes, from the Ibex over here. Those are females that you see over here, the Ibex. Oh, look at this one. Oh, they're fighting for territory. Look how he eats. Fantastic how he stands on the 2 feet and he eats. Okay, you can look from here and we can walk down to the waterfall. But this is actually giving constant water all year round. Look at that. Look at the deer on the Ibex on top. Look at it.
And so even the book of Ruth is well summarized here, because Ruth had gone over to Moab across the Dead Sea from here in a time of famine to go over there where there was food. And while she was there, her father-in-law, her husband, and her brother-in-law all die. And so her mother-in-law, Naomi, as you know, released the 2 daughters, Orpah and Ruth, and said, "You're welcome to go back to your people. You have no obligation to me." Well, one daughter-in-law kissed her goodbye and walked away. Of course, Ruth said that passage that we often quote at weddings: "Whither thou goest, I will go. Whither thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, thy God, my God." And Ruth travels back over here, again, just like that army later in Jehoshaphat's time, loading the water to bring with them to come back across to this area. This is the first stop they have where they can find rest and find water. So you've got to think maybe Naomi and Ruth lingered here for as long as they could, to climb up here just as we did, to get to the fresh water, to get some rest, maybe to find something to eat, at least a shady place for protection. Maybe they spent the night here. But then they go back up and around to Bethlehem, where the story plays out. Ruth becomes the mother, the great-grandmother of King David. And so Ruth begins us in the time of the Judges, in a time of darkness, when people did what was right in their own eyes. And yet the story of Ruth ends us in the time of David, when Israel is ruled by a king after God's own heart. And so many great stories here cross the path of Engedi. And you can see what a beautiful place it is, and what a beautiful, wonderful place it must have been. Also, as we walk out eventually, you won't have quite the view that we would have if we had hiked the treacherous path up to the top waterfall. And it really is, even on a good day, a really tricky path up there. There's a lot of climbing and hanging onto rocks to get up there. But you'll be able to see the view out here of the Dead Sea and the mountains of Moab over across. And so even the book of Ruth is well summarized here. Now that you read your Bible, when you go back home, as we've said many times, you've read it in black and white all your life. Now you're going to read it in 3D Technicolor.
So think about the jealousy of Saul and David. Everybody loves him. And Saul feels real bit bitter. And he's after David. And David is running all the way to Engedi. This is where actually there is the only freshwater spring. David is coming over here and he's fleeing from the rage of Saul. And Saul is after him. A lot of caves over here, you've seen it. David is hiding on one side and Saul is after him. And then the night comes. Saul, he needs to go. So he take off his garment and he is going outside. David people sneak inside, cut a piece of the garment. In the morning, David waved with a piece of garment of Saul's dress. And he said, "Nay, Saul, if I wanted, I had your life in my hands. If I wanted." Saul got softer, and then he replies, "That you, my son David?" We understand the complexable relations between Saul and David in a place like this. But there is another thing that we're saying over here. You see the beauty, you see the nature over here. Desert area, and suddenly the oasis of water, fresh water, living water over here. We're saying also that David probably wrote a lot of his psalms that he wrote here in Engedi.
So every time I've been here to Engedi, we come here in the context of David hiding from Saul, and you think about this wilderness that we just drove through and this lifeless sea out in front of us, and you come here and you see God's provision right here in the cleft of the rock, right here in this little space between two really craggy cliffs, and yet here we have, it's an oasis for this area that has always drawn life here. Here also, King Jehosophat had an enemy army approaching. His instructions are for the army to line up in battle to put the singers out front. And Jehoshaphat is able to go back to Jerusalem a victor. I think there's a lesson in that for us. That we start, when we face difficulties like that, we start from the place of thanking God for who He is and trusting in Him. When we face difficulties like that we have that faithful response of, "I don't know what to do, Lord, but I thank you for who you are and I praise you for who you are." And then God's provision, as it did here in Engedi, works out, not for the enemy, but for you. Why shouldn't our battle be not one against flesh and blood, but one against spiritual forces, one against forces of evil, and one that expresses faith in God the Father? So just another context here for the oasis of Engedi.
That's Hyrax. Cute, cute. Don't get closer. They bite low. Oh, they have sharp teeth, and they are carrying a lot of fleas. So, oh yeah, on the roof. Fiddler on the roof.